Today, we're going to look at the most important crypto news of the week together. We'll be covering Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, Cardano, Kaspa, and Supra. We'll discuss things like ETFs, but also major updates which are extremely important for the individual altcoins as well as for Bitcoin. As always, the goal is for you to better understand the market and be able to make data-driven decisions. Welcome to 10x Crypto, your channel for honest data-driven altcoin analyses. By the way, if you don't have a crypto exchange yet, then check out my favorite one. It's straightforward, it's secure, and it's officially based in Switzerland. And if you sign up using my link, you'll even get a bonus. Up to 50 euros in Bitcoin, and you'll start directly at the silver rank, which means you get cash back right away. You can find all the info in the pinned comment, just use my link. But be careful, a disclaimer. My channel is not financial advice, but is for informational purposes only. Let's start with Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, we're currently seeing two important developments. On one hand, there are the ETF inflows. There were $8.7 billion in inflows, which is obviously massive. In October alone, it was around $3 billion. This shows that institutional interest is definitely there, from large funds and asset managers. Bitcoin is increasingly being bought through regulated products, and that's of course extremely positive. But at the same time, you have to remember that this also led to outflows, meaning ETFs were sold. Of course, this always affects the price both positively and negatively. This is interesting because it simply shows that the price of Bitcoin now depends quite heavily on the ETFs. And as I said, this can be positive, but it can also be negative. In the long run, however, the ETF supports inflows into Bitcoin as an asset class because it allows pension funds and so on to invest in Bitcoin in the first place, which is a positive thing. Now let's take a look at the Bitcoin chart together and see how it's currently developing. Alright, let's jump right into the analysis for Bitcoin, the chart analysis. Yes, as you can see here, basically we had the last green dot here, which indicates an oversold zone, meaning a lot of people sold. It was oversold here. Then we were also pushed upwards into this region. A red dot then appeared, which tends to mean that we're overbought. In other words, there's a chance the price could go down a bit again, which happened here as well, so there were several indicators. And here we had small red dots, which means a trend reversal, for example, a bearish or a bullish one. It was always the case here. For example, bearish trend reversal, bam, it goes down. Here again, a bullish trend reversal, bam, it goes up. Here again, a bearish trend reversal, and down it goes. Currently, we had a bearish trend reversal here and also went down. We actually formed a green dot here yesterday, but then there was a massive sell-off right here. At the moment, I'm assuming that the big players in the market are more likely manipulating the market. And that's why we have to take a look. At the moment, let's just say no large green dot has formed permanently yet. That has always been a good entry point in the past. As I said, as always, there are no guarantees, and this is not a buy or sell recommendation. In any case, it currently looks like Bitcoin is slowly entering a range where we could potentially see a bottom. So it hasn't been 100% confirmed yet. Now let's move on to Ethereum, also extremely exciting. A lot is happening here right now, especially on the technical side, but at the same time on the institutional side as well. The Pectra update has of course improved the network structure. Validators can be deployed more flexibly, and so-called smart accounts make using it much easier. To put it simply, smart accounts are accounts that offer more functions, like automatic payments or security rules. At the same time, the average transaction costs on the network have dropped significantly, and that's extremely important because many decentralized finance applications or DeFi run on Ethereum. On the institutional side, we're seeing that the Ethereum spot ETF has now raised more than $26 billion US. On top of that, there are around 35 million Ether that are staked in the network. Staking means that investors essentially deposit their coins into the network, securing it, and receive a return for doing so. This is exciting because it makes Ethereum a mix of a technology platform and a cash flow-like asset. On one hand, Ether is the fuel for transactions, for example, but also for the applications. On the other hand, stakers receive an ongoing return. Institutional investors who are looking for something like a technology bond, of course, are also finding this increasingly attractive. Now let's take a look at the Ethereum chart together. So let's get to the chart analysis for Ethereum. Yes, Ethereum, it's also very interesting here, for example. A lot of people sold, we formed a nice green dot here, and then we were also pushed upwards. Let's see, 262%. But there were already signs here that we were slowly entering overbought zones, basically here and here. That was the last zone, and then ultimately we were sold off. What's interesting is we had formed a green dot here, so around here. This means that the bottom was actually starting to form here, but as you can see, we still have room to go down. But we were sold off again here and are now basically back at the same level. Here too, the charts are currently difficult to interpret because in my view, there's market manipulation going on. And that's why you have to be a bit more cautious in general right now. But I'd say, by and large, from my personal perspective, the bottom is already quite close. Now let's look at Solana. Here, the focus is clearly on performance and scaling. With the Firedancer update, a new validator client went live on the network. To put it simply, it's an alternative software that runs the network and can process significantly more transactions per second. The long-term goal is up to 1 million transactions per second. This is important for Solana to ultimately strengthen its role as a fast platform for DeFi, payments, and gaming. Additionally, new updates like Alpenglow and other improvements were rolled out, which increase stability and security. In parallel, spot and staking ETFs for Solana were launched. On the very first day, there were $64 million in inflows. Institutional investors are significantly increasing their Solana holdings, in some cases by several 100%. This is exciting because Solana is actually growing out of the niche of being just a technology platform and is increasingly becoming a serious component for institutional portfolios. At the same time, the risk remains higher than with Bitcoin or Ethereum because the network is still younger and you can't forget its history of outages. But now let's take a look at the Solana chart together and see how things look right now. Alright, let's move on to the chart analysis for Solana. Solana in general, what I want to emphasize again and again, here was the bear market. Solana was at $7. So much for the idea that altcoins don't perform at all. Of course, it always depends on which one, but Solana was sold off excessively. Here in the bear market, if someone had really done dollar cost averaging here, around here, they might have an average of, let's say 15. Well, and if you think about it, that would be roughly a 20x, which is pretty extreme if you had sold up here. In any case, it was shown here again and again, repeatedly and consistently. Green dot oversold, dollar cost averaging, green dot DCA here, green dot DCA. And then up here, the local was shown as well. This pattern, as you can see, keeps appearing, reinforcing the same signals over and over again throughout the chart. Here, among other things, it already said, okay, we're slowly entering overbought zones. A bearish trend reversal was confirmed here. And again here, and then it sold off again. And right now it looks like this. We had a big red dot here, which indicates we were overbought and then we were pushed down. Now what's really exciting with Solana is that we've formed two green dots here, which is a positive signal at first, a sign of a bottom. But as I said, there's never a 100% guarantee, of course. But here with Solana too, the signs are pointing towards a potential bottom. Let's move on to XRP. Here, we're seeing an important step towards institutional adoption. New spot ETF. XRP launched under the abbreviation XRPC. On the first day, the trading volume was $58 million. The total inflows were approximately $245 million. A spot ETF allows investors to trade XRP on the stock exchange without having to manage a wallet themselves. This naturally lowers the barrier to entry, especially for institutional investors. At the same time, RippleNet's network is growing as a result. Approximately 300 banks and payment providers in 40 countries are involved. XRP is used as a bridge currency to process payments across borders faster and cheaper. This is also extremely exciting because XRP thus has a very important use case which is focused, let's say, on international payments and liquidity management by financial institutions. If usage continues to expand, this could naturally increase the demand for XRP. But let's take a look at the XRP chart now. Yes, hi and welcome to the XRP chart analysis. We have seen here that in the end we were sometimes shown with a small green dot. Then we rose upwards. It was a bullish trend reversal, but now we have been sold off again with a large red dot. As you can see here, we had a bearish trend reversal here, we went down there, but we're talking about XMP. Not yet in the completely oversold zone. So there's still room for improvement in the end. But here too, the bottom is getting quite close, so slowly. Next up is Cardano. Here we see adaptation and ecosystem building as the main focus. Imorgo and Villex have introduced a Cardano card that can be used in over 130 countries, including integration with Apple Pay and Google Pay. This allows users to spend crypto more easily in everyday life without complicated additional steps. In addition, there is a partnership with the football club FC Barcelona. Such collaborations naturally increase the brand's visibility and can bring new users into the ecosystem, e.g., via fan tokens or digital collectibles. The Cardano Foundation is also building a venture hub, a startup supported with up to 2 million ADE. This will promote developers, companies, and new projects that want to build on Cardano. This is exciting because Cardano clearly demonstrates that it's not just about technology, but about a growing ecosystem where real-world applications are to emerge. Long-term investors in particular pay attention to ensuring that the ecosystem develops organically and does not consist solely of speculation. Now let's take a look at the Cardano chart together. Yes, then we come to the chart analysis of Cardano. The Cardano chart shows a massive upward push, and as you can see, it was extreme. That was in December 2024. And it's been quite volatile ever since, that has to be said. But currently it looks like this. We had already formed a green dot here. That's actually a good sign for a bottom formation. But we were also pushed upwards here, but then showed a bearish trend reversal and went down again. Here too, we have now reached the oversold zone, which is a positive signal at first. So the bottom could be closer than one might think, but it hasn't been 100% confirmed yet. Let's move on to Kaspa, one of the most exciting smaller projects in this news. In recent days, Kaspa has been testing a layer 2 network for smart contracts. Layer 2 is an additional layer on top of the main blockchain that makes transactions faster and cheaper. Smart contracts are programs on the blockchain that are executed automatically, for example, for DeFi applications, meaning decentralized finance. At the same time, an upgrade named Saskendo was activated. This ultimately increased the transaction throughput, which improves the economics for miners. The network has reached record values in daily transactions and is approaching 1,000 public nodes. More nodes usually mean more decentralization and also stability. This is exciting because Kaspa is evolving from a pure payment network into a platform for applications. Paired with a limited maximum supply of KAS tokens, increasing usage can exert long-term positive pressure on the price. But let's now go into the chart analysis for Kaspa together. Then let's get to the chart analysis for Kaspa. Yes, we had, let's say, formed green dots here, all, let's say, zones where it then became more bullish. We were also pushed up here and again here, bam, and then pushed up here. But now we were, let's say, overbought here and were also pushed down. As you can see here, we've almost reached the oversold zone, but not quite yet. So there's still a bit of room to go down until the bottom eventually comes. Finally, let's look at Supra. Supra has launched its mainnet and introduced its own token. At the same time, it's been listed on the larger exchanges, which of course improves liquidity. The project is aiming for very high transaction speeds with a theoretical, let's say, possibility of up to several 100,000 transactions per second. Supra is positioning itself as an infrastructure for DeFi, gaming, and cross-chain communication. Cross-chain means that different blockchains can communicate with each other without users having to use complicated bridges. Additionally, there's a rewards program for developers who test the Supra EVM area. EVM, by the way, stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine, the execution environment for Ethereum-compatible smart contracts. The goal is to ultimately attract developers, meaning to get more developers into the ecosystem to build real-world applications. And that's exciting because it's a combination of high-speed DeFi and a multi-chain approach. Supra is therefore an infrastructure building block if the technology delivers what it promises. At the same time, this is a risk because they are still a very low cap project. But let's take a look at the chart together now. Alright, let's get to the chart analysis for Supra. Yes, from my perspective, the Supra chart generally doesn't look that great. We've actually had massive sell-offs here the whole time, and currently we've had another short push upwards here. It was also here, for example, many people sold, we entered an oversold zone, a green dot was formed, and then we were pushed upwards. If you take a look, it was around here. We were then pushed up 128%. But as you can see, we've almost reached the overbought zone again, it wasn't far off. And a small red dot was formed, which means a bearish trend reversal, and we also went down. If you look here now, we are still a long way from the oversold zone. So I would be extremely careful with Supra at the moment when it comes to an entry. So there, as I said, I would be extremely cautious. Bitcoin and Ethereum are increasingly being shaped by institutions, especially through ETFs and staking. Solana benefits from its massive technical scaling but continues to carry technological risk. XRP and Cardano are focusing on strong real-world use, for example by banks, for payments, or ecosystem development. Kaspa and Supra are more like opportunities and risks in the segment with a lot of potential but also extremely high uncertainty. So it's important for you to always look at all the data and, let's say, not view the data in isolation but in its entire context. If you want to watch the analysis of the altcoins, for example of XRP, which I have fully analyzed including price forecasts, or of Kaspa, then I'll link two analyses here. Otherwise, you can find the rest in the playlist in the 10x universe. Thanks for watching and see you in a bit.